I was at the Earth Summit in 1992, and the Rio speech that I gave has really become its own entity. And so I get asked the question every few years when we have a new anniversary or a new COP meeting, you know, how do I feel and what has changed? So over the years, you know, I've really gotten used to answering these questions, and my narrative has developed over time. But I think today I have a bit of a different narrative. I guess what I would tell that little girl is that things are going to get worse before they get better. And the seeds, or the infrastructure, I should say, that have been put in place to really support extreme capitalism are going to be the architecture that, you know, will really precipitate a lot of loss of nature. But one thing to really hold on to is that people, the majority of us, do believe in sustainability, do believe in the importance of peace. Those things are universal, but the frameworks of capitalism are powerful, and they're really it's going to get worse before it gets better. That speech is very interesting because it was recorded by the UN. I didn't know it at the time, but it was recorded. And then when I got back to Vancouver in Canada, someone at the UN sent me that clip. And I was able to make copies with the help of my mom. I was 12 years old. And our little club, the Echo Club, we made copies. And these are like VHS copies way back. And we sent copies of these all around the world because people were sending letters, not emails, letters requesting this speech they'd heard about. And so over the years, this turned into DVDs. We were sending out these DVDs, you know, people sent in a little donation and covering the costs, and we were sending them out. So it's an interesting story, technology story that we just caught going viral, just like we were just before the internet. The internet only went public a few years later. And so then after years of sending out these DVDs, of course, internet was a thing and people started uploading the video. So I had nothing to do with uploading that video onto the internet, but it's so many different versions translated into so many different languages exist on the internet. So it's a very interesting little case study of technology, right, bridging the kind of viral, pre-viral, pre-internet times. Every few years, there's a spike of views and it goes viral again, and I get, you know, approached by various media. I do a media spike, and it's just really interesting. I think maybe last year, one of the Kardashians posted a clip of it, and I think she thought it was current. A lot of people are very surprised to meet me, and they find that I'm middle-aged and I'm not a 12-year-old. So yeah, it's really interesting just over the years, the different, you know, I went to Rio +5, I went to Rio +10, you know, Rio +20, just every few years there's a re-interest in this. And also, you know, with the rise of youth activism and the prevalence of youth voices in the media and social media, it's also interesting to see that interplay with the Rio speech and what youth are doing today. Youth have always been activists. You know, a lot of people like to say, oh, Severn, you were the first Greta. No, not at all. Youth have always been on the front lines fighting for their people, fighting, speaking truth to power. That is one of the most powerful roles of youth. And it's so important because parents love their children. And so that's an important role. But now we have the rise of those voices being heard because of how the media functions today. The speech at Rio was the result of a year of work, of organizing, of raising money, of so many people supporting myself and my friends just to get down to Rio. Family, friends, friends of family. There was just so many people who were helping us. And when we got to Rio, it was quite overwhelming. There was tens of thousands of people all in different parts of the city. There were so many things going on, but over the 2 weeks, and we had a small booth at the Global Forum where we were sharing our information. People were coming and asking us what we were doing there as children. We started building, support and contacts, and people again started helping us. And it was because of, some coincidence that someone dropped out of a plenary, and someone from UNICEF had happened to hear us before, who bumped into the Secretary General the following day and recommended that these kids would be really great on the plenary session of the UN. And because of that, we were invited at the last minute to give a 5-minute speech. So it was so much hard work, as well as so many people helping us, that by the time I got up there, and it was all very rushed because it was so last minute, but my friends and I were so practiced at giving our message that I knew exactly why I was there. And I was angry. I was very upset because I was able to really connect with the pure reason we were there was to represent the young generations and the future generations who had no vote at those meetings, who were not being represented politically, because even then the capitalist interests were just so clear. So that's what I connected with while I was up there on stage. And there was no question in my mind what my message was. In the 1980s, which is my formative years as an environmentalist, when I was very young, the Amazon rainforest was such an important issue. It was very popular. Singers and movie stars were talking about saving the Amazon and standing with Indigenous people way back then. My family got involved because of my dad's television series, The Nature of Things, where he did several films about the Amazon and about the extreme devastation that was happening, the burning of the Amazon rainforest, and connected with a Kayapo leader called Payakan. And our families developed a very strong relationship and it's a very long and amazing story. Payakan received death threats because he was having all this impact and unifying and connecting with different tribes in the rainforest, and then bringing a unified voice out to the public to say stop. The Cararao Dam, for example, a huge hydroelectric dam that was going to be built. So he was having these successes. He was getting death threats. He came to Canada to live with my family for a couple of weeks. He brought his family. And so when I was 8 years old, his Kayapo family came and lived with us in Vancouver for 6 weeks. So we developed a really strong connection. When they invited us down to the Amazon, to their village, we were so honored to be able to take them up on it and travel down to Southern Para the following year. This was absolutely formative to me, going into the Amazon, experiencing life without our money economy. I mean, this was just, it was like living in paradise. And when we left, I actually witnessed, we were in a little plane and we witnessed the smoke that was coming into the plane. We were witnessing the burning of the Amazon. And I realized, holy smokes, the Kayapo people are, in the center of this, and the forest is being burned. So, I mean, imagine, by then I was 9. These are like really formative experiences. And when I came back to Canada, I had to do something. And so that's when I started organizing. I started a club with my friends, started having meetings, what can we do? How can we learn about these issues? And started, slowly just working on small projects, and eventually a couple of years later, hearing about the Earth Summit that was going to be held once again in Brazil. So there's this, in our family, there's this through line about Brazil. But Brazil, I think, holds a greater import in the world's ecosystem. And that, of course, we all grew up hearing about the lungs of planet Earth, the Amazon rainforest, and hearing about how, by the trees and the ecosystems that are so interconnected, we have this amazing source of oxygen for our planet, the source of climate neutralization, the source of stability on the earth. And the size of the Amazon, just led to this outsized impact on the balance of our planet. And that's why this year, not only having this meeting in Brazil, but this year, the Amazon rainforest went from being a net producer, a net carbon sink and drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. Now it has gone to actually being a net emitter and not being able to absorb our pollution any longer. We have crossed a threshold. And if we're not talking about that in Beilang this year, we are missing the point. We're these gatherings we're having where we come and we do the same thing every year, and we're even when we're making commitments, we are actually just watching the devastation of our life support systems. I hope that this year there's acknowledgement of that reality, and hopefully having it here in Brazil, in the country of the lungs of the planet, there will be an acknowledgement that these thresholds are being crossed, and asking why. Something's drastically wrong with how we're addressing these problems. And that's just facts. That's not opinion. So that's my hope. The Amazon's important. We're not acting like it. And, we're going to have this meeting in Beilang. I hope it makes a difference. And I'm also devastated to hear, there was a road made through the forest just for this meeting. So I got a lot of grief around it. I think my message to the delegates and the active participants is to recognize and acknowledge the thresholds that are being crossed. We have the Amazon rainforest that is no longer a carbon sink, but we also have the surpassing of 1.5 degree of warming on average of the planet's atmosphere. And 2024, another massive threshold. We every month was over 1.5 degrees warmer than average. We promised as an international community at COP21 in Paris 2015, we promised not to let that happen. We committed not to let that happen. We celebrated this incredible achievement. So what does it mean that we make these promises and it means absolutely nothing? That we did not do that. We're not doing that. And I think at this moment, this is an intense geopolitical moment where the institutions of international peace and the United Nations and international law, these institutions are so clearly under threat. And this is such a clear example of that, where we have the clear ignoring of these international agreements and these international negotiations. And so what does that mean? We have to look at that. I want the delegates to be looking at the real forces that are propelling us towards extinction, which is the extreme, completely anti-democratic capitalist accumulation that is being promoted by this paradigm, and which is really holding us all hostage. That is really underpinning the human race right now. And that's what's giving us a crisis of governance. This problem with the environment is a crisis of human governance. And that's what I want people to be talking about and just having a conversation about, because what we're doing is simply not working. And it doesn't make sense for us to just keep going, keep attending these conferences, keep doing the same thing, keep negotiating, keep getting exhausted if it's not working. So I want them to be talking about that. For the civil society and Indigenous people, I do think this is a moment where we need to process some of what's happening. And I wonder, I was thinking one of the things that would be very, I think, appropriate is for civil society and led by Indigenous people to hold some grieving ceremony, some kind of acknowledgement of the losses, some kind of way that we can actually acknowledge what is happening, not to dwell and, just get lost in our sadness or grief, because it is very, very great, but to be able to properly acknowledge what is happening. And, capitalist mainstream modern culture does not like to talk about grief or death, but this is something very real. And when we don't grieve properly, it comes out sideways in anger. So we do need some ceremony. We need some spiritual attention to what is happening to the human race right now. And if we were able to have some ceremony around COP30 and pay attention, I think that would be time and energy well spent. And again, I think the time is returning that colonial peoples are going to be turning to Indigenous peoples of the world and saying, ask for leadership, ask for guidance, ask for the survival skills, and being able to have proper ceremony and acknowledge what is happening is one of those tasks that we need help with, because we have cut ourselves off of our own spirituality and reconnection with ourselves. So I think that is something that I think that needs to happen, and I'm wondering if it could happen at COP30. So that's something I would say. Once we've had some acknowledgement of these thresholds we are passing, of the losses, of the huge human suffering that is happening due to climate change, once we've had a little bit of space to grieve that, then I think we can start to build the new strategy, or raise awareness on the new strategy that is going to help us in this new era find ways to survive. Because that's what we're in. We're in a new climate change era. Climate chaos is upon us. We need to prepare. We need to be ready. And we also need to know what the new path forward is. And I think there's people organizing all over the world on that new path. A lot of interviewers over the years have asked me, why did the Rio Earth Summit fail? And when you look back, it took me several years to recognize that when you look back at what was achieved at Rio in 1992, I mean, it was a huge success. The prestige of the environmental problems, the importance, how they were politically taken so seriously, all the heads of state who attended meaningfully, and the three major declarations and agreements that came out of that conference. I mean, one of them set up the whole United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that's what the COPs have followed after, is based on that framework that was set up in 1992. But all of that is radical compared to or where we're at today. Like, looking back, it was an incredible success. So you have to ask, like, what happened? And what happened in the following years of the 90s and the 2000s were just such an incredible doubling down of promoting the power of corporations and the accumulation of capital, so that we are today really seeing the impacts of those investments in those last 2 decades. So I see that today in 2025, we actually have kind of achieved a kind of, I don't know, maybe an awareness threshold. So we've had these ecological thresholds that we've surpassed over 2024. But through the media, social media, all this information exchange that we have through the internet now, we also have reached an awareness threshold where suddenly it is so clear, even to the mainstream, that our current mainstream North America, it's so clear that this current capitalist paradigm is very colonial and is not working for the majority. And I think in the West, we've been really buffered by our wealth for a long time. We could ignore this. I think the global South has known this for a long time, or I should say the global North has been buffered. But now, with the how extreme our economy is becoming and how hard it is becoming for a middle class to exist, and with the billionaire class becoming just that, an actual whole class of people, it's becoming so clear that this system is not for people. This system is not for the promotion of nature or sustainability. This system is just going to promote profit. And that is not going to keep us alive. So I do think that amidst all of the losses, we are finally at a time when it's becoming so unbelievably clear that this current paradigm is based on greed and that is not good. And that is an important threshold for people to reach, because before, I think that was, an idea that, was more fringe, even to come through at the UN. 1992 was still kind of, activists who were talking about that. Now it's becoming more clear. It's everyone who's suffering from this. So I do think that is a major difference from where we're at right now. Yes, the themes are absolutely the same. And that's why if you watch the Rio speech that I gave, 33 years ago? I mean, some people don't realize that it's actually from so long ago. They think it's current. I talk about, war in the Middle East and, start being poor in India. And these issues are just perpetual, continuing, even though we have all the solutions to our ecological and social problems. So I think we've reached a threshold, and that's my hope. I think we're in a new era where, our Earth is not going to be as generous. We're in the new climate crisis era, but, increasingly more and more people are realizing what's actually happening. Well, first of all, I have to say that young people today have every reason to feel angry, every reason to feel upset. And it's really important to find people and places where you can share that and talk about the loss. I think it's a really important thing that we have to do. And I didn't used to pay enough attention to spirit and to our soul. But with the amount of violence and loss that young people are seeing through the internet, as well as the pressures from the climate crises that we are all becoming connected to. I mean, here in Canada, we are starting to see climate refugees in our own communities as people are having to flee the wildfires that are becoming part of our summers. So young people are starting to be part of this. And I just think that we really need to build up our supports to help keep ourselves and our spirit strong. And that is really, really important. So we got to do that. And then we got to be part of the resilience. We got to be part of the resistance. And there are so many incredible people that I have met over this lifetime of being involved in activism, in solidarity with Indigenous movements, in being part of fighting for a sustainable environment. And these people, these individuals are showing me how we can be different. So today, I'm so inspired by the Haida Nation, who this year got full recognition of title, not only by the BC government, not only by the federal government, but by the Canadian courts. So title of Haida Gwaii belongs to Haida people, as it has for over 13,000 years, but it's recognized by the Canadian government. This has huge implications for land back, for Canada, and for the world. And they're struggling like everybody else. They're dealing with climate change. They're dealing with all of the social challenges of today and the legacy of colonization. But they are taking it back. And there's examples of Indigenous people all over the planet that are building back after the impacts of colonization and are building, strengthening the traditions and connections to the earth that they do have. And they're living in an alternative way, or in an alternative from the mainstream economy. And that's what we have to, that's what I want young people to know, is that today there's just this idea that we have to participate and we go and we buy stuff and we have to, you get a job and you have to pay for your rent and all of these things. And there's this idea that this is the economy, this is the way the world is. But this is not the way it always has been. And in so many places around the earth, the economies have looked very different. There's been barter systems, there's been exchanges of goods and services in totally different way that isn't just for the accumulation of wealth. And you need to know about that. You need to know about all these alternative systems that not only exist today, have always existed. And those are very real ideas that we can build upon that will help us find our way back to a sustainable living economy. So don't let anyone tell you that this is the only way it's ever been, the only way it ever can be, because it's so obvious that the system isn't working. And luckily, the diversity of human species and cultures shows us that there's so many different ways of doing things. So find those people, find those ideas, start practicing them, and you'll find an incredible community of inspiration, as I have.